radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
Indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde, and today we're going to be talking about fixing the GOP. Now, I chose that term deliberately. It's not about restoring the GOP or preserving the GOP. It's about fixing it. And we could mean it in the veterinary sense of neutering it, which probably is one of the more accurate depictions of what's being done, or in the sense of fixing it, as in wink, wink, the fix is in when it comes to the GOP primary. So this is going to play into a lot of the push that you're seeing for open primaries, for ranked choice voting, but most importantly, it's about why is it that those who insist that those who belong to the party, and particularly who hold office and serve within the Republican Party, why is it considered so extreme to require them to live up to what they have agreed to live up to by being a member of the party, by signing on to the party platform? Well, let's talk about this a little bit. First of all, we start with the Idaho Capital Sun, a headline that, of course, leaves no doubt that purity tests and bullying are the reasons that there is division within the Idaho GOP. Okay, that's their interpretation. Subheadline, as disputes become public, some Republican county leaders say the party's more concerned with beating each other than beating Democrats. Okay, they're partly right, in the sense that there are some who are more concerned that they would lose power if they adhere to the Republican Party platform. In other words, there are limits on government power. There are games that should not be played with lobbyists. IACI, I'm looking your direction. And yet they don't want to lose that power. So they would rather lie down in bed with Democrats, or, masquerade as Republicans, but really vote and conduct themselves as Democrats. You can see where it might lead to some problems. The problem is, only those who are standing up for the actual principles that differentiate the Republicans from their Democratic counterparts are referred to as extremists. So let's get into Clark Corbin's article here a little bit. The intensity of the division is ratcheting up again. It certainly is, but please don't think that it's all coming from Dorothy Moon. In eastern Idaho, the Bingham County Republican Central Committee filed a lawsuit against Idaho Republican Party last month to block Dorothy Moon from stepping in to hold an election to fill county leadership positions. In western Idaho, and this is the one we're going to focus on a little bit more today, 6 officials with the Ada County Republican Central Committee resigned en masse October 5th after alleging bullying tactics by state party leaders and expressing concern with the direction of the party. There were some other interesting things that happened with their departure, but we'll talk about that in a few moments. Things that make you wonder if, maybe it's really not all about, I'm just trying to do the principled thing here. Could be about, I just need to stand up for my power and the money that goes along with it. So let's talk about the Ada County Republican leaders resigning. The Ada County Republican Central Committee members who resigned were former chairman Victor Myler, former first vice chair Megan Reichel, former second vice chair Travis Clyde, former third vice chair Barrett Tetlow, former treasurer Dave Lister, and former state committee woman Kim Wickstrom. When they announced their resignations, the Ada County Republicans listed 5 reasons that they said the statewide leaders of the Idaho Republican Party make it impossible for them to lead in Ada County. So they had their reasons. Okay, let's see what some of those are. They listed as one reason that the state party passed a rule that creates a waiting period of 2 years or more before voters who switch their affiliation from one political party to another can vote in a Republican primary election in Idaho. Now, the former Ada County Republican Central Committee calls that rule a purity test that will inhibit the growth of the Republican Party in Idaho. You know what else it will inhibit? People crossing party lines to spoof a primary election and then going back and changing their party affiliation immediately after and voting the way they intended to in the general election. So yeah, it's, I can see where it might discourage some people from hopping over immediately. But how often is that? How many people join a political party on a spur of the moment? You're right. Oh, suddenly the light came on and now I want to be a part. I don't see anything particularly unreasonable about this, especially considering that these are private organizations and they have that freedom of association and they can set their own rules as to, okay, that's fine. You can be part of the party, but let's make sure you're actually sincere about it, as opposed to just coming over to offer some trickery and try to game the system in favor of a Democratic candidate or other candidate. So it can go both ways. I'm not saying that it's totally without merit, but a purity test, it's more of a test to see, are you just gaming the system, or are you actually willing to subscribe to and uphold the principles of the Republican Party, the platform, that is. The Ada County Republicans also took issue with what they call tribunals that the Idaho Republican Party can use to censure candidates and strip them of state support. Now, you have to ask this question: why would they do that? What could possibly prompt that kind of a response? They also cited the assessment of party dues by the state and what they alleged are bullying tactics by statewide party leaders. Now, I want to talk about that censoring of candidates and stripping them of state support. If those candidates are voting for things or supporting things or campaigning for things that are directly opposed to the platform, should they not be held accountable? They're out there representing the party, right? Why shouldn't they be held accountable? And if they're not conducting themselves as they should and representing those principles, then perhaps they should move on and stop trying to pretend that there's something that they're not. Again, this seems very reasonable, but they're holding these tribunals. What they're trying to do is make sure that the people who are representing the party are doing so honestly and with accountability. For some reason, accountability doesn't sit very well with some folks. The energy of the party is more about infighting than collaboration, more about beating each other than beating Democrats. That's according to former Ada County Republican Central Committee officers who wrote this in their letter of resignation. We can no longer support this system. We hope that when the state GOP's intentions and tactics are fully brought to light, the ship can be righted to include all Republicans and to return power to the voters and the counties. That all sounds very noble and good. But again, I've got to float the possibility. What if you have people who are doing their best to masquerade as a serious, principled Republican who in fact support principles that are very antithetical to the Republican Party? What then? When you're told no, does that mean, well, this party's out of control and they just want to destroy us all? Hardly. It just means it's time for you to go start your own party, or, go align yourself with a party that represents what you are willing to do by your actions, not just your words. Now, responding to this, the Idaho Republican Party in a response said these accusations from the former officers are little more than projection and sour grapes from an old guard that is angry about losing their own power. The Idaho Republican Party will continue fighting for faith, family, and freedom, and representing everyone who stands for Idaho values. Now, I'll be the first to admit here, I am not a party animal, and I don't, I'm not going to swoon over this, but they do have values that they purport to uphold, and it is in their interest to make sure that their party members are upholding that. Now, how ruthless they're being, I don't think it really comes down to, they're just trying to ferret out any kind of disagreement. What it really comes down to is, are their party members, by their votes or by the way that they are supporting policy, enabling government to grow, the cost of government to grow, the intrusiveness of government to grow beyond what it should legitimately be doing? And if the answer is yes, then they need to be held accountable, because those things are actually operating against faith, family, and freedom. Limited government, on the other hand, which I think you'll find a pretty good description of it if you read the state Republican Party platform. It's a really good description. Now, not everybody easily lives up to it, but it's a very good standard to which they should be aspiring. So I don't mind them using the term Idaho values, but I understand that can be a malleable term in some people's, mouths. Now, the Idaho Republican Party said rules requiring voters who switch their party affiliation from another political party to the Idaho Republican Party to wait before voting in a Republican primary are designed to keep outsiders from infiltrating their ranks at the polls. Has this happened before? Yeah, it has. Otherwise, they wouldn't be concerned about it, and they wouldn't be taking steps to try to avoid it. But see, if we can make this all legal and proper, then what we can do is just, have an open primary and ranked choice voting and totally muddy up the system and just basically make it easier for people to do that without having to be surreptitious. Crossover voting is a real problem as high-profile figures encourage Democrats to register as Republican to change the outcomes of our primary elections. according to the Idaho Republican Party. Moon and statewide leaders of the Republican Party also rejected the accusations of bullying, saying there are thousands of volunteers serving the party, which is energized with more grassroots support than ever. The only bullying is coming from those who take to the pages of mainstream media to attack their fellow Republicans. By the way, interesting story too. You know, when these Central Committee members resigned in Ada County, the portrayal of that resigning was, it threw the whole party into chaos, and it was just such a tumultuous event. And take a look at some of the eyewitness accounts, though, from people who were there. And while it was surprising, I mean, they all resigned right before the meeting started. Guess what? The people who remained, using Robert's Rules of Order, sat down, came up with solutions, moved forward, just exactly as you would expect. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, these people were indispensable. How will we ever find our way? Okay, they didn't spend their time condemning and, we're going to make them pay. We'll get the witch doctor to put a curse on them. It's what we'll do. No. In other words, they stepped up and did the business that needed to be done. And to those 6 members of the Ada County GOP who stepped aside, I wish you the very best. Go find some place where you are comfortable, some place that better represents your principles, or that what principles you're willing to live up to. But I don't think they want to do. They want the organizational power that's already at hand in the Idaho GOP. And it's understandable. It is the dominant political party in the Gem State. Totally understandable. They would want that. But they don't want to pay the price of actually living up to its principles in order to have access to that power. Now, this also brings up some very interesting possibilities as to what exactly, does this do for the Democratic Party? Well, Idaho Democrats wasted no time in putting out a release saying Dorothy Moon's cleansing mission to rid her party of any remaining bipartisanship and moderate Republicans is backfiring. So when they talk about bipartisanship and moderate Republicans, they mean anybody who will do our bidding, anyone who will go along with whatever it is we're peddling. And by the way, there's a lot of Republicans in office that will do this. Just this last week, 6 officers, including the chair of the Ada County Republican Party, resigned, citing that Moon and her hard right controllers, now she couldn't possibly be principled herself, have made it impossible to lead effectively. Are they leading, or are they trying to govern? Are they trying to just legislate? Are they just trying to be busy and grow the size of government and in the involvement of government? Because that's not the same thing as leading. Sometimes leading means putting down a hard line, as Dorothy Moon is doing, and saying, we shouldn't be crossing this. Oh, look, the Democrats are actually using Victor Miller's words in part of their own advertising. Victor, you got to be honored, man. They're actually validating you and apparently accepting you as one of their own. Victor, congratulations. You have successfully dismantled Idaho's strongest battleground county party. Hey, the Democrats love that. The cabal of state Republican elites is focused on centralizing power and diminishing the will of moderate Republicans through tactics like purity tests. They must have run that one in front of a focus group. And censoring their own, or holding them accountable. It's another way of saying that. The Idaho Democratic Party, on the other hand, hand over heart, is committed to building our party from the ground up by investing in our local parties and empowering our members to exchange ideas freely. Yes, and you're not above gaming the system either. But there's a reason why democratic values are not widespread in Idaho. And it's not that there aren't good people out there who are Democrats, but the Democratic Party has become very radical. Okay, look at this last one here. It's always been hard for Dorothy Moon and her friends to accept the truth, but most Idahoans indeed reject their fanatical far-right impulses. What would those be? I'm just curious if anybody from the state Democratic Party would like to flesh that out a little bit. I mean, those are some scary buzzwords, but I'd love to pin you down on some definitions. What exactly are those fanatical far-right impulses? Freedom of conscience? Appropriate limits on objectionable material being given to our kids? Standing up for the right for innocent life? What else? The right to bear arms, the right to own property, the right to associate with whom you want to associate. Those are all very basic natural rights. Those are essential freedoms. I mean, far-right impulses, I guess only to people who really want to control those who want to claim those rights. As we have witnessed, the truth will not deter them from continuing their callous crusade against bipartisanship and moderates. Bipartisanship is just another word for weak-kneed, bigger government. Everybody, let's get wishy-washy. Let's meet in the middle and decide how much bigger government's going to get, not whether it should be getting bigger or not. That's what it means. It's up to us Democrats to take advantage of this excellent opportunity to stay focused on what matters. Good schools. How would you define good schools? Where the curriculum leans hard towards rainbow-flavored activism and gender confusion and trans students apparently accessing restrooms and this kind of thing. The objectionable how-to manuals on same-sex relations being put into their libraries. What exactly makes it a good school? Good leftist indoctrination? Maybe you should clarify for us. Fair taxes. That is the mating call of someone who sees anybody else's success and has enough envy to think that I deserve a part of that. They should pay their fair share. Hey, if they work their butt off, they've already paid their fair share, and they deserve to keep what they have earned. Clean air. Yeah, we all like clean air. Just some of us aren't really willing to hand over more money and more control in the name of saving the climate, to central planners. And of course, bodily freedom. Of course, they could have been more honest, just said abortion on demand, but they say bodily freedom knowing full well these are the maskers, these are the force the jab on people types who absolutely, could not understand why people would refuse the ministrations of, the health authorities when there were serious questions about, hey, why are you forcing this on us? So a bit inconsistent in their messaging, but there's the Idaho Democratic Party. Hey, come on, the sun is shining. Let's make some hay while we're at it. So, Idaho Tribune, looking at those 6 members who resigned from the Ada County GOP, noted that there were a series of odd donations from Ryan Hardy to the Ada GOP Central Committee and then back. It appears that Mr. Hardy was refunded $6,000 by the Ada County GOP just days prior to Victor Miller's abrupt resignation. In fact, we actually have some receipts here to show you what that looks like. Oh, yeah, Ryan Hardy donated $6,000 to the Idaho Majority Club. Wait, what's that? But before that, he got $6,000 returned by the Ada Republican Central Committee. Isn't that interesting? So Ryan Hardy got $6,000 returned by the Ada County Republican Central Committee, and then he donated that in turn to the Idaho Majority Club. What do you suppose that is? Well, Idaho Tribune tells us, coincidentally, a new Rhino political action committee called Idaho Majority Club, founded right after the Idaho GOP summer meeting, popped up. So that's where Ryan sent his money, to the new political action committee, which will keep money out of the hands of conservatives. Interesting. And very timely. I think in other failing regimes or failing systems or governments, you'll often see a tendency to want to loot the treasury if they can. So maybe there's a smaller version of that. Yep, there's the appointment and certification for political treasurer for candidate and Idaho Majority Club. So yeah, they're going through all the legal motions. Gee, I wonder if they're on the side of that, ranked choice voting and open primaries. Now, Ryan isn't the only one with these strange refunds. Interestingly, almost all of the donations returned by the Ada County Republican Central Committee went to construction and development. Look at this. Idaho Land Fund, Building Industry Group of Treasure Valley, BlackRock Homes. There's Ryan Hardy. How about that? I don't know. Is it legal? This comes amidst threats from Victor Miller, Tom Luna, Trent Clark, and other liberal Republicans who vowed to purge the party of all conservative precinct committeemen during the May primary next year. The Idaho Tribune says, I really hope none of this is illegal. I would agree. I don't know if it's illegal, but it certainly, on the surface, it appears at the very least to be unethical. And that's never a good thing. I like Brandon Durst's comment here. Let's face the facts. He's taken a look at a call from House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Now, this is at the national level. This is in Congress, calling for traditional Republicans to break with the extremists. So it's not just happening in Idaho. The people who want to hold on to power at all costs, anybody who challenges that is going to be called an extremist. Brandon Durst says, well, let's face facts. We see it in Idaho. We see it nationwide. Moderate Republicans, what some call rhinos, a term I try to avoid using, ultimately would rather support an extreme left-wing Democrat over a conservative Republican. Jeffries understands that. What we're seeing here is simply, that we're going to fix the GOP, but we're going to fix the GOP in such a way that we retain the power. And that's what they want. It's not about principle. Look, government can be a good and it can be a blessing. It can actually make life better when it's constrained to its proper limits. But when it's not, it gets into all kinds of interesting favors for friends and buddies and, different lobbying groups and special interests. And then it just turns into a great big game where the people who are part of that game do very, very well. And in return, those who benefit from their legislation will kick back money to help keep them in power. This is why I say politics itself can be an extremely amoral type of job, because the politicians will say whatever they need to say in order to get elected. They'll do whatever they need to do to keep those donations coming, to keep them in power. So when these, quote, extremists come along insisting, hey, we have limits to what government should be doing, and we should not be intruding into people's lives in these ways, and we should not be giving out these favors to certain groups, well, they get called extremists, and we're told that, we have to find some way to water this down. This is why we push for ranked choice voting, which definitely waters it down. I'm sorry to say this, but, most of the voters that would be participating, or at least would feel like, wow, my vote finally counts under ranked choice voting, they're low information voters. That's not an insult. That's an acknowledgement of they show up at the polling place, wet their finger, stick it up in the air and say, okay, which way is the wind blowing? Do they really know? Whereas with representative government, that is, and this is what the Republican primary uses. In the primary, those candidates have to earn their way onto the ballot. And if someone's being shady, they have a very good chance of being turned away. Now, unfortunately, we're seeing that some of the shady ones are the people who have been in power. They think they're entitled to it, and they just want to keep it as long as they possibly can. But if you can appeal to the people who don't have as much information and convince them, hey, we're just making your vote count, there are probably a lot that'll buy into that, thinking that, oh yeah, not realizing that they're just their votes being watered down along with everybody else's, and through complicating the election system and complicating the process, they can game it in such a way that not the most principled candidates are likely to find their way into office. One final thought, and this applies to politics as well as a few other things, but here's something I want you to keep in mind. You've got to be willing to question and go to the source whenever possible. If you're relying on what is being reported to you, either through social media, through mainstream news, or even through alternative sources, do you really know what you think you know? Because those who know the least are the ones who are going to obey the best. I think this is probably one of the biggest reasons why ranked choice voting and open primaries are such a high priority. The people who know the most are the people who are actively participating right now. Somehow, their influence needs to be blunted. That's apparently what the establishment Republicans and others are trying to do, because they know that the deception is up. People are catching on to it. You don't look at Brad Last and say, oh, what a great conservative. Look at all the conservative things he's done. Because it's clear he's not acting like a conservative. He talks like one. They all do when election time comes around. But when it comes to actually behaving like one, that's a different matter. And if there's any place that the GOP needs to be fixed, as in restored, it's showing those individuals the door to make room for people who are principled. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.